Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into something that's been making waves in the music industry, and that is music ownership rights.
Yeah.
You might be like a huge music fan, or maybe you're a lawyer,
Right.
or just curious about why this is such a big deal.
Exactly.
So we're going to unpack all of that today,
For sure.
and we're going to use Taylor Swift's experience as our guide for this deep dive.
You know what's really interesting is that this isn't just about like one artist's fight for control.
Right.
This is something that Taylor Swift has really kind of brought to light.
Yeah.
That has been going on for decades in the music industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh.
So before we get into all the drama,
Yeah.
let's break down some of the basics.
Yeah.
When we talk about owning music,
Yes.
what does that even mean?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So there's two main pieces to this puzzle.
Okay.
We have masters and we have publishing rights.
Okay.
So imagine you've written a song. Publishing rights are kind of like owning the blueprint to that song.
Uh-huh.
So it's the melody, the lyrics, the composition.
Right, so like the foundation of the song.
Exactly, it's the foundation.
Okay.
So if you own those publishing rights, you essentially control who can record and perform that song.
Got it.
Now, let's say someone records your song,
Okay.
that specific recording,
Uh-huh.
the one you hear on Spotify or on the radio, that is the master recording.
Okay.
So owning the masters means you control that specific version,
Okay.
how it's used, who profits from it.
So that's where things like streaming royalties and licensing for like movies and commercials, that's where those come in.
You got it. And historically, a lot of artists, especially early in their careers, have signed away those valuable master rights to
Right.
their record label.
Yeah, and that is where Taylor Swift comes in.
Yes.
She signed with Big Machine Records way back in 2005
Yeah.
when she was just getting started.
A baby.
So can you give us a little bit of context on what happened?
Yeah. So Taylor Swift, she had phenomenal success with Big Machine Records. She released her first 6 albums under that label. But because of that initial contract, Big Machine owned the masters to all those early recordings,
Right.
which, as you can imagine, were incredibly valuable.
I mean, yeah, she was putting out hit after hit.
Exactly.
So those masters are going to be worth a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so then in 2019, music manager Scooter Braun bought Big Machine Records
Yes.
in a deal that was worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Huge deal.
And that meant that Scooter Braun now owned all of those Taylor Swift masters.
Exactly. And this is where the conflict really begins, because Taylor was publicly very unhappy
Right.
about this sale,
Yeah.
feeling as though she had lost control of her own artistic legacy.
Yeah, she called him a bully
Yes.
publicly. And yeah, I mean, this wasn't just about hurt feelings though, right?
No.
We're talking about a ton of money in future earnings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Owning those masters meant controlling a significant portion of Taylor Swift's musical legacy, including how those recordings are used and who profits from them.
Right. So what did Taylor do? I mean, this is Taylor Swift we're
Right.
talking about here.
She's not going to just sit back.
Right. She's not just going to let this happen.
Exactly. So she attempted to buy back her masters from Scooter Braun, but according to Taylor, the conditions were unacceptable. They wanted her to sign a long-term contract, essentially trading her future work for her past work.
Wow. So she was stuck.
Yeah,
But she did something that really shook up the entire music industry.
she did.
She decided to re-record
Yes.
those first 6 albums.
Such a power move.
I mean, it was genius. And it all comes down to those publishing rights that we were talking about earlier.
It does.
So even though she didn't own those original masters, she still owned the rights to the songs themselves.
Exactly, because she wrote or co-wrote all of her songs.
Okay.
She still held the publishing rights, and legally this meant she could go back into a studio, re-record those songs, and create new masters that she would fully own.
Okay, so she found like a loophole
Exactly.
and she leaned into it hard
Yes, it did.
because she released them as Taylor's version,
The Taylor's version.
which was like brilliant marketing.
Such a smart move. It was not only a savvy business decision, but it was a really powerful statement about artistic control.
And her fans loved it.
Oh, they loved it.
The Swifties.
The Swifties.
They got behind this idea.
Yes.
And they were streaming and buying those re-recorded albums and sending them straight to the top of the charts,
That's hot.
which was just a huge message to the industry that they were behind Taylor in this fight.
For sure.
But I think what's so fascinating is the wider impact this had on the music industry as a whole.
Yeah, you're right. This wasn't just about Taylor Swift and her music.
Right.
This sparked a much bigger conversation about artists' rights
Mm-hmm.
and the power dynamics between creators and the industry that profits from their work.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was huge. Yeah, it was really a watershed moment. All of a sudden, artists and industry leaders and even politicians are talking about, the implications of Taylor Swift's decision.
Did other musicians start taking notes?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We saw, just this wave of support from
Yeah.
other artists that had been through similar situations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Kelly Clarkson, for example, she was publicly, encouraging Taylor and even offered to buy the re-recorded versions
Bro.
just to show her support.
Yeah, it's like if she can do it, maybe we can too.
Exactly. And it wasn't just moral support either.
Right.
Other musicians started to, kind of reevaluate their own contracts, and some even considering re-recording their music.
Mm-hmm.
So it gave them a playbook, a way to potentially reclaim control.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the artists. I remember seeing lawmakers like Elizabeth Warren and AOC weighing in on this situation.
That's right. And they kind of used Taylor's case as a springboard to criticize the practices of private equity firms in the music industry.
So were they saying that they were exploiting the artists?
Their argument was that these firms, they're primarily focused on profit.
Right.
Often prioritizing financial gains over the interests of the artists, that are actually creating the music.
Yeah.
So it became a larger conversation about the balance of power, in creative industries.
Right. So Taylor's experience brought it to light. But did we see any, concrete changes in the way the industry operated?
We did actually, some record labels maybe feeling the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
They actually started changing their contracts.
Oh, wow.
So in some cases, they made it harder for artists to re-record their music.
Really?
Extending the waiting periods or even trying to prohibit it outright.
It's almost like a counter reaction.
Yeah, almost like trying to close that loophole that Taylor exposed.
Wow, that's wild. So to be clear, Scooter Braun eventually sold those original masters.
He did.
To Shamrock Holdings, which is a private equity firm owned by the Disney estate.
Wild.
Did Taylor finally get her music back in that deal?
She did not, unfortunately.
Oh.
There were reports that, Taylor tried to negotiate with Scooter Braun before the sale.
Okay.
But it doesn't seem like they could reach an agreement.
Wow.
She claimed that he wanted her to sign an NDA.
Oh, really?
That would have prevented her from speaking negatively about him, and she refused.
Wow. So the saga continues.
It does.
But even though she doesn't own those original recordings, her re-recording strategy has given her a really powerful way to control how her music is used, especially when it comes to things like film and TV.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we call this synchronization.
Okay.
Or sync for short.
Okay.
And it's essentially the licensing of music for use in visual media.
Oh, yeah.
So, think about a movie scene.
Right.
Where a song, perfectly underscores the emotion, or a commercial that uses a catchy tune to sell a product.
And those sync rights are valuable.
Oh, they are.
Extremely valuable.
Whoever owns the master recording controls those rights and gets a cut of the licensing fees.
Right.
And this is where Taylor's strategy gets really interesting.
Okay.
By refusing to license the old masters, she's essentially taking away a major source of income from whoever owns them.
Yeah, and offering up her Taylor's version recordings as the alternative.
Exactly.
So if a filmmaker or an advertiser wants to use a Taylor Swift song, they have to go to her.
They got to come to Taylor.
Which is brilliant. I mean, it's a total power move.
It is.
And we've already seen examples of this. I mean, remember that Match.com commercial with Ryan Reynolds?
Oh, yeah.
They used Love Story Taylor's version, not the original.
Exactly.
So it's almost like she's created like a parallel market for her own music where she's in control.
She's the boss.
But what about the average listener? Do they even notice the difference?
That's a great question. And, while Taylor made a point of recreating those albums very faithfully, there are subtle differences. Some fans even claim that the vocals on the Taylor's version recordings are stronger.
Interesting. More mature.
Which makes sense.
Right.
She's a different artist now than she was back then.
Exactly.
But beyond the music itself, there was a deeper message at play here.
Absolutely. For many fans listening to the Taylor's version recordings, became a way to actively support her and her fight for artistic control.
Right.
It was a way to say, we're on your side, Taylor.
Yeah, it's inspiring.
It is.
That she took this situation that felt so unfair and found a way to reclaim her power. But was this just a one-off event? Or was this like a bigger shift in the music industry?
That's a complex question.
Yeah.
On the one hand, Taylor Swift is a unique case. She has a level of fame
Yeah.
and a dedicated fan base that most artists don't have.
Right. Are you saying that her strategy wouldn't work for everyone?
Not necessarily, but it might be more challenging.
For artists that don't have, that same level of recognition and resources.
Okay.
But what Taylor did was create a blueprint, a roadmap
Right.
for artists to navigate these really complex issues and advocate for their rights.
It's like she said, here's how you fight back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that message has resonated far beyond just her own career. We're seeing more and more artists demanding fair contracts, owning their masters, and taking control of their creative output.
Right. We've talked a lot about the artistic implications, the financial implications.
Yes.
But what about the emotional side?
Ooh.
What does it mean for an artist to truly own their work?
That is such a fascinating question,
Yeah.
and one that I think deserves its own deep dive.
Right. Yeah.
But in essence, it's about agency.
Okay.
It's about having the power to shape your own narrative, to decide how your art is presented to the world.
It's about more than just money.
Yes.
It's about respect, recognition,
Yes.
ownership of your creative legacy.
Exactly. And that's something worth fighting for.
This has been such a great conversation,
It has.
and I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
The tip of the iceberg.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to get your final thoughts.
Okay.
What is the biggest takeaway you hope listeners will get from this?
I think the key takeaway is that the music industry is evolving.
Mm.
The old power structures are being challenged,
Yeah.
and artists are finding new ways to assert their rights and control their own destinies. Taylor Swift's story is just one chapter
Right.
in this ongoing evolution.
It's a reminder that even in an industry that is, dominated by these big labels and these huge corporations,
Yeah.
that individual artists can make a difference.
Yes.
They can use their voices, their platforms, and their creativity to fight for a more equitable and just system.
Absolutely.
And maybe even more importantly,
Yes.
they can inspire others to do the same.
Well said.
Welcome back to our deep dive into music ownership.
Yeah.
We've talked about so much, from the basics of masters and publishing rights to Taylor's bold re-recording strategy and its impact on the industry. But before we wrap up, I want to ask, did it work? I mean, did Taylor Swift's strategy actually work?
I mean, I think the numbers speak for themselves.
Right.
Her re-recorded albums Fearless, Taylor's version, Red, Taylor's version, Speak Now, and 1989, they all topped the charts,
Right.
proving that fans were enthusiastically embracing her versions.
Yeah, it wasn't just like a symbolic gesture or something.
Yeah.
It was commercially successful.
Yes, very much so.
And sending a really strong message.
Absolutely.
And speaking of sending a message, what about those sync rights
Oh, yes.
that we talked about?
Synchronization.
Yeah, because she refused to license the old masters.
Yes.
So companies looking to use her music in movies and TV and commercials had to turn to the re-recording.
Exactly.
It's like she just flipped the script
She did.
and
Well,
took control of her music's destiny.
It's amazing, and it really set a precedent, I think, for other artists.
It's like she showed everyone else how to do it.
Exactly how to take back control.
And she said, you don't have to just accept this.
Yeah.
You have options.
You have a choice.
And that resonated, I think, with fans too.
Absolutely.
Because listening to Taylor's version was a way to support her
It was.
in this fight for control.
It was a way to vote with your dollars.
It's incredible how this, one artist's actions spark this huge conversation
It really is.
about fairness and ownership and the future of music.
And that conversation is still ongoing.
Yeah.
We're seeing more and more artists demanding better contracts, owning their masters, using their platforms
Right.
to advocate for change.
It's really a reminder that even in this industry that's dominated by these huge corporations, that individuals
Yes.
can make a difference.
They can.
And that collective action
Yes.
can lead to some real change.
It's inspiring.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening.
It has.
And I think we've all gotten to learn a little bit more about the complexities of music ownership
For sure.
and the power dynamics in the industry
Absolutely.
and the potential for artists to take back control.
Yes. It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
On this deep dive, we hope you learned something new. And we hope you'll continue to explore these issues on your own.